we're going to do our little garden patch. Some hibiscus, some tomatoes, and these tomatoes I got for free from the family farm, and they're leftovers. Everything's leftovers. Just clearing out the greenhouse, and I usually wait for that. And what I'll do is I'll top some of these things, and they might be a little bit root bound and whatever, but you know, they're all free. So we have a bunch of sweet peppers, hibiscus, tomatoes, some really cool flowers, and those are all basil starts, and they've already bolted because they were in the heat. We'll just pinch the tops. My main issue is that this is my garden space, and I've let it just sit empty, and I think that all that's left in it is some chives that we just took the tops off of. There's a little oregano sprouted here and there, but waterproof. It'd be hydrophobic at this point. Like where you water it, it's basically waterproof. Like off a duck's back, you water it, and you probably experience that, all kinds of situations where things get totally dry when you water them. You can water them for like 20 minutes and then move the dirt aside and it's dry. So, it's a nail from when I put ashes in here. This is chicken poop. And it's the pure stuff just off the top of the nest, so it doesn't have all the seeds and stuff from the hay. And the white stuff is ash, which I threw all the, it's also what all the charcoal pieces are. And I threw all that in there from our fire as we're cleaning out the stove all year long. And we need to keep this from being like waterproof and totally dry. And in nature, when the layers of dirt are built, what happens is that it takes an entire season for it to rot down in the dirt. And while that's happening, there's all these things falling down like little twigs and leaves and branches. And it not only adds more fuel to the soil all the time, but it makes it to where when water's hitting it, it has chutes and ladders, ways for the water to, and the oxygen to get back and forth between all the layers. And because it decomposes quicker or slower at different rates than all the fine particles, it's able to hold the space a little bit longer. It's kind of like when they put the little white stuff in the soil, the vermiculite. It does the same thing, and I find little pockets of like fungus growing in it, so instead of being totally sterile like the vermiculite where they want total sterile situations, it's alive and full of fungus, which is good for a garden. And if you took all this and you ground it to a fine powder, it would be very compactable. It would take the least amount of space. Do you understand that? So if you had a cup of, what, mulberries, right? There'd be airspace in between each of the mulberries. But if you ground them all up, you know how they would become more compact? So there wouldn't be airspace. And if you're talking about dry dirt, then you wouldn't be able to get air or water in there very good, and it becomes hydrophobic, meaning, you know, it literally sheds water. So what we're going to do is we're gonna kind of employ hugelkultur, which is a German word that just means hill, making little hillocks, and you know, it's done all over where you put organic matter down. You can plant a compost heap. Everybody knows that's like the best. We're going to take this flat compacted soil, and I'm having to dig it a little bit to loosen it up. And we're going to make spots. We're going to put larger organic material in there, actual little twigs and sticks and stuff, and plant in it. And it becomes so hot out here that that's going to allow me to water and hold water down in there longer. This flat surface acts like a wicking, like when you put a paper towel down on water and the water spreads sideways through it. This kind of does the same thing. It's constantly wicking up into the air. So we're going to add little caves all over in the soil where the water can hang out, and it'll be way easier and quicker to get the water in there too. So that's the basic concept. We're going to use what we got. I'm using real neutral materials, nothing too acidic like oaks or pines. We're going to use fruit tree branches and stuff. Doing real light amends like this chicken poop. I'm going to put that in there now, and all the ashes and stuff. And then give it a little dig, and then as we're planting, we're going to make kind of a ditch. We're going to fill it with stuff, add some dirt, fill it with stuff, make a good little mix and then plant right in that. And that's what plants grow in nature. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have done so far is we flipped it over and dug a trough. And in that trough, we put a bunch of fresh organic material. It's about that deep. And about 6 inches apart because it's super hot up here. So we want these when they're adults to push together. And the idea is we're just going to have a swampy little trough here. Some of my biggest material down in here. When we cut it aslant, it's easier than cutting straight through, so we can do that many at a time. I'm using my Baco Pradines. These are really awesome shape, design. I haven't ever found anything better. I think you gotta order them online mostly now in the US. And these are gonna be our little sponges and spacers. Organic vermiculite replacements, substitute. You guys got some leaves over there?
Yeah.
Okay. Sprinkle a little dirt down in that. Got a little handful of leaves here. Some thin material, that's like worm food right away. It'd be like shredding paper in there. And then our start's actually going to sit in here, and all that space is like a root cellar where water can penetrate down into here and be held like a sponge. And it won't just be this soil, which is all so uniform, it has a tendency to wick too good and dry itself out. And can even form into strata layers by accident and not let the water penetrate it good. So everywhere where there's a little twig, leaf, or stick at angle, that's where water can get through all those layers really quick. It makes your watering go quick and easy and last a long time. Okay.
I think we're going to bury this next row. Pinch? Yeah, pinch see where the seeds are? Just pinch them because we don't want those. yet?
It looks great.
Are these too close?
Nope. So one of the places that I gather organic material from is I'm lucky enough to live right on a creek. This is my gardens that go up here and stuff. And, you know, I leave the interface pretty wild. But there's all these willows here that have grown in the last 10 or 15 years. And it's just part of the cycle of a creek, and it's getting bigger and bigger. But I keep them cleared off on my side and just keep these coffee berry trees for shade. So one of the things that I'm constantly using it for is as compost, and what you've seen me already doing, putting it in the soil and stuff to hold moisture and act as spacers and spongers. And I use you know, I wouldn't use just pine or just oak or bay or anything that's crazy pH in one direction, but things like willow, cottonwoods, all kinds of things like that. The fruit trees are really kind of a balanced mid-range pH. They break down easy, and this is actually one of the things that they use to, they actually make the product Rootone out of, I think it's salicylic acid, same thing that you use for making aspirin. That's why you can use aspirin as a Rootone, so it's a, you know, stimulant for root growth. And I've cut this down year after year after year, otherwise it would look like that and I would have no play area. And willows, they'll come through here and glean this, and it's great stuff to throw into your soil or to top dress with too. So this is where I stand about forests. These leaves are the ones that are just now falling. Mixed in with them are branches of all different sizes. And there's last year's leaves. As we go down, it'll be the leaves from the year before, and the year before. And they get more and more broken down until they actually start turning into dirt. But that dirt will have all the little twigs and sticks. So this not only holds water well, but it lets water and air get down into it again. And doing a good job. If you ground all this up and made it in the dust and tilled it, it would just be completely compacted the second that gravity and water acted on it. So there is still life left in the soil. I just hit a pocket, went deep enough. We're actually over here underneath the mulberry tree where it's been raining all the berries and leaves, and where it gets kept wet. Out here it went kind of fallow and barren. But that's what that is the mushroom colonies. That's the actual living thing that the trees and everything are connected to. That's feeding them. And you can see it's woven through all the soil, but what it's mostly eating when you look at it really close is the little pieces of organic material. All these little twigs and all these little things. So be wary when you get soil out of a bag or anywhere. When you're dealing with soils or any sort of material, rock, anything, you want the materials you get the largest compaction out of. I mean, it squishes down the most, the tightest, which is what you don't want. Compaction is bad for your soil. Every time it gets squished down, that's bad for it. It's one of the main things that kills off soil. And in nature, everything drifts down from above and gets piled up, it gets grown on and gets layered. And that's what keeps the fluffiness and all of the non-uniform pieces. So one of the ways that you can make things compact more when you're working in construction and stuff is you work with sand and substances like it, because they're so uniform that there's very little space left in between the particles when it all packs down. So that's one of the deceptions about tilling too much and trying to get your soil completely broken up and trying to keep all the little particles out of it. Even rocks can actually be beneficial for holding space. That's again why people add vermiculite and stuff, is for spacer. And if you till something too much, it can look super fluffy, but that same fluffiness is just temporary, and as gravity and time and water act on it, it actually compacts down, and things that make soil spongy are larger objects in it. Literally a stone, literally a twig, literally a leaf, a root that was there that's dead, that's dying now. And those are actually the same channels that all the organisms, your earthworms and everything, not only eat down, but they travel down all those voids. And it's what keeps the whole thing going. And you need oxygen and water to penetrate soil, or it dies off completely. And there's no life going on in it. So you can see the mushroom colonies here, and this will lead us into the last part of putting all this organic material in there, is we're adding a lot of carbon. Carbon is what these feed on. These feed on all the organic material that you're putting in the soil. They're connected to the roots of your plants. They feed the plants. The plant only has so large of a root system, so this allows it to forage way farther out. Nutrients that this piece of mushroom, this section, absorbs and dissolves and turns chemically into the starches and the protein, or the starches and sugars that the plant needs, can actually be sent long distances over to the plants, so they can reach out way farther than their roots. And most plants, they take up to 40%, sometimes 50% of the sugars that they make. That's what they do when they use photosynthesis and they turn sunlight into their food as they're making sugars for themselves, just like we do, kinda. Plants take about 40-50% of that and send it down into the soil. They're actually cultivating these. These also eat sugar, and by feeding them sugar, by absorbing the sunshine and feeding the colony sugar, they work in a symbiosis like that, and they of course benefit because then their root system basically is connected to this huge grid in the soil. As you're adding a lot of organic material, your funguses, all of the little guys in the soil, can actually bloom up so large of colonies that they start competing with your surface plants. It can actually turn around on you. That's the warning. And you can get nitrogen deficiency from adding stuff trying to feed your plants more. So one of the cures I use for that is things like molasses and quick sugars, and feeding that into the soil, and you can actually make your colonies happy and the competition slows down. And it's only a temporary thing. It'll turn around on you as soon as they've broken down enough of the material, which is why you want them there, to where both them and your plants are happy. But they can get out of control to the point where they're actually competing with your plants and doing the opposite of what you want. But there's an example of life. As we dig down here, there'll be a whole layer. So the reason why it's existing in this layer is because oxygen, UV, heat, everything has penetrated the soil to a level they can't live up at these levels. That's why we don't have mushrooms actually blooming off of them at the surface. But down here, they've been safe because they're deep enough and you can actually see their layer. If you look really close, I mean, there's this white layer will go all through, and it's soft. Now, by bringing them up to the surface like that, tomorrow when the sun comes out, they'll all die off. So that's one of the other things that happens when you till. And that die-off can actually cause nutrients, and again, for ages and ages, farmers saw the plants benefit from that and went, wow, well that's good too. But what you're actually doing is disturbing a huge network colony that could stretch for miles. These are the largest organisms on Earth. They spread out under entire forests and basically connect every living thing on the planet through a root system. Basil, peppers, planting them close on purpose because it'll be 100 degrees for 10 days at a time up there. I don't want the leaves to just completely shade the ground. I just want to water a mass and then have to tiptoe between it. It's the rest of our organic matter. And this side will be tomatoes. We got raspberries along the fence, and then you're not in the garden, right? Just 1 foot. Oh, and your nose. He listens. You're a good boy. He's our little tender bunny rabbit boy. His mama raised him like a... It's my middle girl's dog. More. He's part hound dog, so he's got the ears. The floopies. Okay. Okay. Got the tomatoes in. Just doing like 7 of them. And then chives. So tomatoes, assortment of peppers, basil. Real simple this year, but we do a lot of pesto, a lot of red sauce. Trying to just grow what we're going to use because everybody's really busy right now. And planted pretty plain. Sometimes we do patterns and little pathways, but we're just planting tight and in a grid.